I told you guys earlier that I had this email that was sent to me. It got, the schedule got turned upside down a little bit with Peyton's scheduling issue. But I wanted to come back to this email that I got from a gentleman that I met just before the pandemic at an AGD event that I was speaking at. And really nice guy. I vaguely remember him. I remember where he was sitting, and I spoke to him maybe for 15 seconds. But he sent me this email, and I got it a couple weeks ago. I thought it would be appropriate to share with you guys. Dear Mark, I'm not sure if you remember me, but we met briefly at the AGD chapter meeting that you spoke at in New Jersey just before the pandemic. I should have reached out sooner to let you know this, but your presentation was excellent and it was very well received by the chapter members. You had the room captivated from start to finish, and I know that's not easy with a 4-hour lecture. After the meeting, I started listening to your podcast. Honestly, I'd never heard of a podcast before. It's great and very well produced. Do you do that all yourself? I don't know how you find the time. I learned so much from you and all the smart people that you interview. I have to admit that watching you speak I have to admit that after watching you speak and sometimes after listening to one of your podcasts, I'm filled with sadness and regret. I just had my 73rd birthday, and you, the young, ambitious people in my AGD chapter, and all the successful people on your podcast are a reminder of all the things that I've done wrong in my life and all of the opportunities that I've missed. 5 years ago, when I was 68, I sold my practices of 38 years. It was never a huge practice, but at one point in the late 90s, it was producing over $600,000. I have no idea about any of my numbers, like overhead or profit. I just got too involved in the business. I just never got too involved with the business side of the practice. I left that to my wife, who was the office manager and the receptionist. It wasn't a fancy practice, but provided my family with a comfortable life and helped me put my 2 kids through college. And I'm proud of that. When I turned 60, things started to unravel in my personal life. My marriage of 30 years was coming to an end, and we ended up getting divorced. My ex-wife got the paid-off house, and I kept the dental practice. For me, that was a trigger for heavy drinking and depression, 2 demons that I battled my whole life. My practice suffered during that time too. I had almost no desire to do anything beyond just show up, see a few patients, and leave. Some days I'd show up to a completely empty schedule, and that was just fine by me. By the time I decided to sell my practice, there wasn't much left, and a good month was $25,000. I ended up selling the practice for just over $160,000, and after the sale, I took some time off to deal with my alcohol and depression issues. During that time, I lived off the proceeds from the sale. After a lifetime of practicing dentistry at 73, I'm ashamed to admit that I live alone and have less than $100,000 left in the bank. Since I quit drinking, I feel like a new man. Most of my classmates and colleagues have long since retired, but I need to work a few more years to get back on my feet financially. I was wondering if you'd be willing to pass on my resume to anybody looking for an associate in the Northeast. Also, on an unrelated note, I'd be willing to come on your podcast anytime to tell younger generations of all the things not to do to end up broke in your 70s. There are so many things I wish I would have done differently. One of my favorite questions that you ask to your podcast guests is, what advice would you give to your 25-year-old self? If I could go back, I'd shake him and say, Jack, quit drinking now. It's going to ruin your life. I'd also tell him to learn about the business side of dentistry. Put away a little every month for retirement. And when you get married, be a good husband. When you have kids, love and pay attention to them and keep in touch with your friends. Maybe a cautionary tale episode. I've taken enough of your time. I know you're a busy man. Blessings to you and your beautiful family. Jack. So, Jack did not realize that he was making a decision his entire life by not making a decision. Right? You guys probably know my story. After 6 practices, I ended up realizing a lifelong dream, and that was my 7-7-35 goal. That 7-7-35 goal meant that I wanted, when I was 15 years old, I made this goal. I wanted 7 figures in the bank. I wanted $1 million in the bank. I wanted to be making $1 million, $83,333.33 per month. And I wanted to do it by the time I was 35 years old. I gave myself a 20-year window. I woke up one day and I was 38 years old, and I realized that I had accomplished the 7-7-35 goal, but it was a 7-7-38 goal. It was also the same day that I realized that I'd never been more miserable in my entire life. It was a catalyst for me to do a little deep reflective thinking. And when I took a look in the mirror, when I did this audit, I realized that the price that I was paying for my outcomes was too high. I had met all of my financial goals, but the price that I was paying in all of my other quadrants was too high. We didn't have the 4 Futures framework at the time, but I was smart enough to be able to look into the mirror and say, my relationships are on the rocks. My default disposition is anger, frustration, and not being a very nice person. Right? I was a collegiate athlete, an athlete my whole life, and I was having heart palpitations, high blood pressure, and my BMI was going up every single month because I was eating shit food. Every other area of my life was falling apart, but I hit the one goal that I set 20 years earlier. That was my financial goal. What I've since come to realize is that if you focus on all of your other quadrants first, the financial stuff comes a lot easier and with a lot more fulfillment. What I want for everybody here is not just a 10x on their investment for being here and the time and effort that they took to be here in this room with me right now. What I really want for everybody in this room is to make sure that the price they're paying, that you are paying for your outcomes is not more than the outcomes are worth. Don't make the mistake that Jack made. Jack did not do this audit until he was 73 years old. If he would have done it 30 years earlier or 20 or 10 years earlier, he could have had a completely different outcome for his life. And he wouldn't be looking for an associateship at the age of 73. I know this is an extreme case, but how can you reflect and make that applicable to your own personal life and your own personal situation?